This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode, a terrific show and interview. I am so excited. I've had an opportunity to reconnect with one of our favorite regulars. This young man played in my clubs many, many times, and he had such funny material. My wife and I continue to bring it up and make ourselves laugh. But let's get talking to him and find out what he's been up to and how he got into stand-up comedy. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to make this clear. His actual name is Cody Cotulla, but I know him as the ever-famous and popular Cody Blaine.
Oh,
Cody, the crowd goes nuts. It's so nice to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to be talking with you, Scott. We connected. Very nice.
Yeah, I've mentioned it before for my listeners, but one of the reasons I do this podcast is just a great excuse to reconnect with old friends. You and I probably haven't seen each other in 25, 30 years, but like I said in the intro, Jill and I still remember and share some of our favorite bits that you used to do. But let's back up and let the audience know a little bit more about you. Cody Blaine was a regular road performer back in the 80s and 90s and had the opportunity to work for me many, many times. We always enjoyed him, but I don't really know the backstory. How did you end up in stand-up comedy?
I know it's a funny story. I started out when I was a kid. When I was actually in high school, I used to say I was either going to be a doctor or a stand-up comic because I really...
Those are so close.
Yeah, they're so close, right? And everyone would always say, be a doctor, which is, that's the mean thing that people say. But because I used to love to watch The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and then I would go to the school and elementary school and middle school and do the bits that I heard either the comics on The Tonight Show do or that I heard Johnny Carson do. And I used to love reading joke books and telling jokes, and people would tell me jokes. So I thought, I'm going to be I thought really I would want to be a stand-up comic or be a doctor. And so I ended up joining the Army.
Did you really?
I did. I
joined
the Army.
That's so funny. I did not know that. What branch?
Yeah. I was in the Army.
Oh, the Army. Sorry, you said that.
Yeah. No, that's all right. I was in the Army branch of the Army. Well, I should say I joined the American Army.
Good to be clear in this day and age.
That's right. I used to joke on stage. I used to say, hey, I joined the American Army. No, I have to say that because I don't want people to think Kiss Army. That's what I'd go into a bit on that. So I joined the Army. I had a 3-year commitment, and I knew after about 6 months that it was not for me. And I said, but I still had to spend the rest of the time in the Army, doing Army stuff. So I ended up I had gone back to, I was in Germany. I went back to Texas. And when I was in Texas, I actually did I went up on stage to do, it wasn't really a stage. I actually did it was a talent contest. So I went up and did a talent contest, and I had one joke written. And I thought that, like in my regular life, I thought, I will just go up, tell this joke, and then funny things will come to me.
Some people think it's that easy.
Yeah. And some people go up on stage. So I've told this story many times, so let me finish the story. So I go up on stage and I have one joke, and my one joke is, my friends go out and drink beer and they say that it doesn't affect them. But then they end up going home with ugly women. They go out to bars, they drink beer, and they go home with ugly women, right? So I thought that would get a laugh. It got nothing, right? And that's my only joke. And so I'm standing there trying to think of another joke, trying to think of something, like waiting for the wave of funny to come. It's not coming. And someone in the audience says, in the silence, someone in the audience says, yeah, that's why you'll be going home with an ugly woman. And that actually gets a little bit of a laugh, right? And so then I said, yes, I'll be going home with your date. Yes, and that got, as you can imagine, that got just this gigantic wave of laughter. I mean, it was just like a thump, the kind of laughter, that happens in a comedy club where it's just like the whole place just erupts. And that moment, just that one laugh, I didn't get any more laughs, but that one laugh, I felt like I could do this. I'm going to have material. I knew I had a lot of work to do, but just getting that one big laugh in that moment that, I can do comedy. And so,
well, it's been mentioned a couple times by other comics that there's nothing like the adrenaline rush and the sense of accomplishment when you can get up in front of a bunch of strangers and make them laugh. And we've tried to impress on people. In fact, I have a comedy course online that talks about that. One of the reasons, well, there's a lot of reasons why people get into comedy, but one of the reasons they stay in comedy is there's nothing out there that I know of that gets you that same sense of great accomplishment and good feeling when you hear a huge wave of laughter. And I think that what's interesting based on your story is that laugh that you got ad-libbing to the guy's heckle was a way better response than you would have ever gotten as a surgeon.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned actually that laughter, and I've thought a lot over the years and thinking not just that laugh, but there's that feeling, and you get it. There's different kinds of laughs that you get at a comedy club, or really in any environment, but mostly I think at a comedy club. And that laugh has a very specific quality to it. And what I realized after years of, doing comedy, watching other people, like I said, watching other people do comedy live, video, whatever, is that feeling, that laugh, it's sort of like that explosive laughter. What I recognized that it was the feeling was the audience relaxing.
Oh, so
it's
true.
Like,
so true. You know what it is? They're accepting you. Yeah.
Well, they're accepting you, and they realize that, wrongly in my case, but when that happens to a comic like in a club who knows what they're doing, they go, oh, thank goodness this person knows what they're doing. We're not going to have to watch somebody up there, let's say, sucking and feeling bad, right? We don't have to feel bad for this person who's bombing.
Right.
Instead, we can just enjoy it.
Yeah, audience empathy has to be one of the worst things that could ever happen to a professional entertainer when you're bombing so bad, which we have all done. But when the audience is sharing that sad moment through their empathy, that is really the 180-degree feeling of the great feeling you get when you get the laugh. In other words, like a lot of industries, you have your highs and your lows. And I think in stand-up comedy, getting the acceptance and the laughter of strangers is the high, and the low is when you're bombing and they're all like, it'd almost be better if they booed you. It's so bad when they're just sitting there shaking their heads like, oh yeah.
And they pity you. I would have experiences. That is the worst. I would have experiences, and we'll get to in a minute and at some point talking about my experiences with laughs. But my mom would sometimes come to watch me do comedy, and somehow always sit where I could see her. And
no pressure there.
And I swear that she thinks she loves my comedy. She thinks I'm super funny. I can make her laugh at any time, except when I'm up on stage. I would watch her face, the absolute terror on her face while I was performing. Just like, it was so, she'd be like mumbling my act along with me because she'd heard it, but she would just be like, oh, I could just see how scared she was.
Oh, and because she was feeling for you and oh, that would be heart-wrenching. Well, so that first time and you got your first big laugh, when you got out of the Army, did you make a point of starting to write material and get on stages, do open mics, that kind of thing?
What I did there, so after I did that, I was at Fort Hood, Texas, and there was in Austin, they had a couple comedy clubs, including, I guess, the last one of the last anyway. They had a thing called the Comedy Gym. right? And that was there was an improv, and then there was also a stand-up. And so I went there, and I had written one joke, or I'd written a kind of like a story, like an essay. It was a baseball bit, which I ended up doing for years. And so I went there and working with them, I honed that bit, and then I went up and they had a showcase night for all the people in the comedy gym. I had a great set, performed a little bit around Austin before I got out of the Army. And then I came back to San Francisco. I came back to Sacramento, actually Lodi, and I would then drive to San Francisco. And that's when I started going out to open mics. And that was a very eye-opening experience.
It's so much different city to city. I'm sure that the audiences in Texas had to be, well, there's nothing like San Francisco. Those audiences are all different from New York. New York's even exceptionally different another way.
Yeah.
And then LA. And of course, the friendliest of comedy towns, Sacramento. Do you remember what year this all was, Cody?
This would have been 88, 89. But and taking a step back, so I had been before I went out to Germany. So I went to Germany. I came back, and what happened was my second introduction to Laughs Unlimited. I had come back from Germany to Lodi, and I had friends there, and they said, "Hey, we're going to go out to a comedy club." So they took me out to the Laughs Unlimited Stockton, and that was the second time I'd seen live stand-up comedy. And I was in Stockton. And that night, I was like, this is before I went up on stage, and I was still thinking about it. But I think I wrote down the first idea that I had the first idea I ever had for a joke of my own was at that, coming home after watching a show there. I came home, and it was just kind of weird. I had drank tea. I didn't drink caffeine, so I was really wired at night. And there was a police action, right? So there was a police action around my mom's neighborhood where she was living, and the helicopters were flying over, and it went on for like an hour or 2 hours, right? And they would have the megaphone, "Come out, you're gonna, come out," blah, 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 and all these things, right? And eventually the person in the helicopter, they said, "Come out, this is your last chance," right?
Right.
And then the helicopter just flew away. And I just thought that was so funny, this idea that these criminals, the cops are saying, "This is your last chance to come out and surrender. Because if you don't, we're leaving."
So that was kind of your first conceptual bit. And
Right.
I did not know that you were inspired by seeing a show at our Stockton club. Lynn Stobiner was the manager and host there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't suppose you remember any of the acts you saw. That was quite a while ago.
I don't remember it. And actually, the very first time I ever saw comedy was at your club in Old Town, and that was when I was in high school. So I was in high school in Elk Grove. I went with a friend of mine to see a club, and I don't remember any of the acts. But only thing I remember is that was the night that Dana Carvey canceled because he had just gotten Saturday Night Live.
Oh, that's so funny. We have been sharing a lot of Dana's material, and I have a video on my video archive membership site of Dana performing Choppin' Broccoli, literally with his entire band, and he and his brother had a band. But then one of my favorite stories is I was sitting in a jacuzzi with him the night he got a call from Lorne Michaels to get Saturday Night Live. And the fact that he had to cancel to do Saturday Night Live, I don't really blame him for that.
No, I don't either. But although I have, I've never seen him perform live, and that would have been my chance. So maybe at some point he's still out there doing it. So.
Oh yeah, he's still working, and I have some great video I can share with you on that. Well, it sounds like Laughs Unlimited was a part of your life even before you really became a professional comic. Do you remember how you ended up working for me? Was it one of the showcases or comedy competitions?
It was a showcase. So I came up, so I'd come up to do I came up to do a showcase, and I had been, so I did a showcase for you. You liked me well enough, and you booked me for a week at your Stockton club. So that was the first place I ever performed was in Stockton, and it was nice because I could sleep at my family's house in Lodi and drive to Stockton. So.
Oh, that's cool. And it kind of took you full circle from being an audience member in the club to being on stage. That had to feel somewhat rewarding. And one of your first bits was the helicopter story. Was that one of the first ones you wrote and performed on stage?
You know, I never, that was a bit, I never actually did that bit on stage.
Okay.
I wrote that down. It was just, I thought this was a good idea. I never worked it out to get it up on stage.
Struck you as funny and just never forgot it.
Yeah. And like I said, I wrote it down, but I just never worked it and never worked it to make a bit out of it.
So it was, Cody, there's a lot of material that you have shared with me and my audiences at Laughs Unlimited over the years. But now that you are doing showcases and then I booked you as a professional comic, big step, because you're going from doing freebie open micers or competitions to a paid gig. And you probably got paid crap. But if you're getting paid to do comedy, that somehow cements you in the industry. And where you go from there is totally up to the entertainer. But by getting that first check for doing stand-up comedy, it makes you a pro on whatever level. And then what level you go to depends on the entertainer. Some never get any higher. Some never achieve that. But I think it's a real stepping stone to your career to get that first paid gig. So what was one of your early jokes or bits that kind of propelled you into professional entertainment?
You know, I think it was interesting. So I had a Little League bit. That was one of the first things that I ever written, and it was a long bit, like maybe like a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, which was long for me. And then I had some bits about one of the bits that I did for a long time, actually, and did it recently even, was a bit on horror movies, and that was a bit where I talked about the Mummy. You know, I said, the Mummy moves slower than people evolve, and yet people freak out when the Mummy's coming. You know, and be like, Ron, the Mummy's coming. He's going to be here Thursday. And I did this whole thing about the Mummy.
And I remember you doing that bit because everybody kind of thinks it when you're watching those horror flicks. It's the same as Frankenstein. You know, run, he's coming. And these guys move like molasses, right?
Yeah. And so my twist on the idea was, I would say, the Mummy would catch people get in their cars, drive to Chicago, the Mummy would be there waiting for them. Like, it's a train. And then I said, I figure all people have to do, is go upstairs. The Mummy can't bend his knees. He just be at the bottom of the stairs going,
So, I don't remember that part, but that's true and funny. Kind of the same with Frankenstein. You don't see him leaping up stairs very often.
That's right. It's like, oh,
that's so funny.
Fence. It's like he's stopped by a child gate. Oh.
What are those child safety gates? Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, that's really funny, Cody. Well, speaking of funny, I've alluded to a couple times, and I want to ask you what some of your fondest memories of working for me over the late 80s, early 90s. My wife and I constantly bring up she fondly remembers a bit that you didn't do on stage, but a story you told. Maybe you could share a short version of it now about you being an American Indian, I think. And then the other was, I used to love the bit about getting pornographic magazines.
Oh,
and your wife catches you, and so you stop. And then when you call to cancel, the lady on the other side, I'm going to do the joke. I love it so much.
Yeah, go ahead.
The lady goes, if you'd like to continue receiving the magazine, but don't want your wife to know, say a fruit.
Yeah.
And there's this little pause, and you go, mango.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to steal your joke.
No. I'm glad that you remember it.
Oh man, it's still one of our. It was the way the inflection that you would pause after the operator gave you the option. You would pause and go, mango. And it's just the way you did it was hilarious. But anyway, why don't you share a little bit about your experiences working at Laughs Unlimited, and maybe share that story that Jill's talking about all the time.
Yeah, I'm going to try. I have to try to remember that story. I think I've gone through enough therapy that I don't have to tell the.
It was something about you being around like 10 years old, right?
Yeah. Well, I had so many great experiences at Laughs, and I want to, I guess a kind of a couple, memories. Some of them are memories that I had, and I was like that I. Just that were just really good memories, and then some of them are really good memories, sort of like as I've gone through my life. But I think one of the things is that a great memory at Laughs is that I didn't meet my wife at Laughs Unlimited. I met her actually helping my brother move, but she came and saw me with her brother-in-law, who was gay, but I thought that she was dating him. But and so that was
honest mistake.
That was just a nice. That's a nice memory. Anytime I think about Laughs, I think about she saw me do comedy. She saw me as could see me do something where I'm super competent at, and I think it kind of cemented me being attractive to her. I like to think.
Well, it says a lot, because if she could accept the fact that you did comedy for a living and went and saw you, that actually probably strengthened the relationship, because not a lot of women can put up with comics. Trust me, my bride knows.
Yeah. Well, so that, I think that was a big thing. And I think one of the things was, my comedy was always, I always wanted to be funny. I was somebody, I think that I like to do the things that I thought were funny. I tried to be funny. I was never up there someone that I didn't ever want someone to walk away going, God, that guy made me feel really bad. I want to be, I like to make people laugh and feel good and do things that I thought were funny. So that a couple other things I mentioned, we were talking before he came on about Bobby Slayton. He was somebody that you paired me with a couple times. And I one night, I guess I must have been opening. And so you went out and you were doing your stuff, and which is always great. And I guess the audience wasn't reacting that well to you, right? I don't know, maybe it was an early night in the week or something. And Bobby Slayton goes to me, he comes up to me and he goes, "They're going to hate you."
Yeah. So we should explain to the audience, Bobby Slayton is considered the pit bull of comedy, and very funny guy, but very hard hitting on the audience and topics. Mm-hmm. And the reason you'd be paired with him, Cody, is that after watching you, which is this light, bright, positive comedy, Bobby Slayton's material would hit that much harder. And as a producer, my job was to make everybody look good. For example, I would never have you follow an act like that, because you would have died. But opening for an act like that, it sets him up. My job is to make the headliner shine, right?
And that was, definitely. And that was definitely, those were definitely great. I really always enjoyed those shows because Bobby, there'd be a lot of people there. And I felt, even though my comedy was never nothing like his, but his audiences always were very generous to me. Actually, that was the other thing I think at Laughs Unlimited. The audiences were always so generous. They were the best audiences I ever played for. And the other thing I think that, unlike you go around to a lot of comedy, and a lot of great comedy clubs out there, but I think that I never felt like I was performing to the audience and to you. And I think that was the thing about going out to some comedy clubs where you don't know people necessarily, you're not necessarily established. You're always both trying to play to the audience, and you always kind of feel like you're also playing to the club owner or the booker.
Right,
or
constantly showcasing to hold your job.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard that before, and I think, thank you for the compliment. And I think that that's true, that if you got to the point where I was paying you, in other words, you were considered a professional, I expected you to act as a professional and do what I was paying you to do. And that expectation led me to focus on everything else you have to focus on when you're running a show in a restaurant and in a bar. And I trusted the entertainers. If they wouldn't be there if I didn't trust them, and you included. But thank you for saying that. That's a different perspective that I haven't heard before, and I've done 50 of these interviews. So that is a terrific thing to share. Thank you, Cody.
You're welcome. And now since I'm saying those kinds of things, kind of in somewhat in seriousness. In serious, I say that in 100% seriousness. But the other thing that happened, so I worked the clubs. I was performing, doing some road things, and I opened for you for a long time. And I remember I came and maybe you probably don't remember this, but I asked, I said, Scott, I think I'm ready to feature. I think I'm ready to middle. I felt like I was having strong sets. I was performing, I was having good sets, and I thought I was ready. And you said to me, well, yeah, you're funny, but your act is very loose. I don't know if you use that exact term. So your act is loose. You can tighten your act up. You need to tighten your act up, and then I will feature you. And I remember at the time I was just so mad. I was like,
well, I was trying to set a serious expectation, and from my years of experience, I was seeing something in your presentation that needed tightening up. And if I didn't like you or appreciate you as a professional, I wouldn't have been honest and shared my advice with you, because my goal was to always advance talent.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. So I was like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to tighten this out of this act. You're going to, and so I did, right? So I went and I cleaned, and I not cleaned everything up. It was clean, but I tightened things up. I think I probably just from that, I probably, became, at least half again as good. I improved so much by tightening up my act, right? By doing that. And, if you hadn't said that, if you'd said what, you could have said anything else, and maybe even you could have featured me, but by giving me that honest, feedback, and that as you said, it was kind of, I like to say this idea of tough love, it made me a better comic. And so then I did it, you featured me, and then it was great after that. But I just thought, so ultimately I very much appreciated that. And I'll tell you what, in my career, really, that was the only time in my career that I had someone give me that, that kind of tough love. It's like, hey, we like you, we think you're good, but you need to do this. And anyway, so I appreciated that. I appreciate that a lot.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And again, it was totally selfish, because if I make you a better act, and we're talking about a laughs per minute ratio or a pacing ratio that keeps the audience attention and keeps them engaged, it improves not only that particular week's show, but it improves you as a talent, which means I can take advantage of that more and work you more. And I'm just glad it worked out. And I'm assuming that once you tightened up your set and you were featuring, that allowed you to make more money and get more gigs outside of Sacramento.
It did. Yeah, I did go out. I did kind of start getting some, I got gigs. I was on the road doing a lot of opening stuff. One of my big struggle was just not the business side. That was always a hassle. And I think I'm sure I'm not the only comic to ever experience that.
No, and I've had a few people say, in fact, I know for a fact, one of the funniest guys, he's on my podcast all the time. We're just finished doing a whole series with him, Bob Worley. One of the, I think one of my funniest headliners, ended up getting out of the business early because became a father and his focus changed. But he has admitted that his weakness was on the business side. He was a Class A headliner working as a headliner at clubs all over the country. And yet, when it came to negotiating a price or travel or anything, he was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. And that isn't correct. It's a business. In fact, one of the things that I stress in my comedy course is that this is a job, that it is fun. It is at night. There's women, there's drinking, there's a lot of laughter, hopefully on stage. But for the producer, my job is to produce a show that people are willing to pay for, and they get what they pay for. For an entertainer, it's meeting those producers' expectations, fulfilling the time that's expected of me, entertaining the audience at the level that I'm getting paid for. And that's work. And it's so funny because a lot of people don't get that when it comes to comedy. Well, those were great things to share. So you were working regularly at all my clubs, and you had gone from opening act to feature. And I know that, we bypassed the story that Jill shared. That's one of her favorites. And just as a reminder, you were like 9 or 10, and you felt for sure that you had Native American blood.
Oh yeah. So there's a couple. I mean, actually, I'll tell you the story. Yeah. So I, growing up, this is probably not the exact same story, but one of the things is growing up, so my dad left when I was young, and so my last name's Cotulla, and he said he told us that that was Mescalero Apache.
Oh, right? Apache name?
Yeah, that could be a Cotulla. That's a Mescalero Apache. And so when I was growing up, people used to say, "Oh, Cotulla, that's an unusual name. Well, what kind of name is Cotulla?" And I would say, "Well, it's Mescalero Apache," and they would go, "Oh." And really, I say, "Yeah."
Just from your father saying so, it has to be true. We all trust our dads. It has
to be true, right? So then when I was about 25, my older brother, he calls me and says, I got two, tells me, so basically, when I was 25, I found that the Cotulla was not Mescalero Apache. It was actually Polish.
Well, the Poles weren't known to go on a rampage once in a while.
That's right. So hence, I would like to say, hence I went by Blaine.
Well, the story that Jill liked is that it wasn't something you did on stage. You were doing it off stage. We were all sitting around having drinks, and you told her a story that you thought you were American Indian, and that you would put a feather on your head, and you would run around pretending you're an Indian, and then the feather would fall, and you would just stop and cry until your mom fixed it.
Yeah.
And like you said, it sounds more like therapy than funny, but
yeah, I would stop and cry until my mom, I would just scream until my mom came and straightened out my feather, and then I would just be off again, and I could just see my mom cursing. And so I would put a feather in my head. I also wore I wore a breechcloth. That's a loincloth with a flap in the front and a flap in the back. And I made mine by tucking washcloths into my underpants.
When you're a kid and your father tells you something like that, you want to believe it. It makes your life a little more exciting and interesting. And I think that what the reason Jill took to the story so much was that, of course, you were sharing, maybe a therapy moment, but you were sharing this bit of your childhood with her and a couple of the other staff. Yeah. And when you told the story, it's almost sad that we can't, we're going to share some of your comedy later on, but you're a really nice guy, and you have, you're sweet, you're a sweet looking man. I know that's not what guys want to hear, but it was so cute. That when you're telling the story about, being 9 or 10 and doing this, your inflections and your voice and your look, it was like they were totally engaged in the story, and she's never forgotten it. So you may have, but
it's so nice.
She thought it was one of the funniest, cutest things she'd ever heard. And 25, 30 years later, still shares it.
No, I mean, that's so fantastic. I mean, you, as a comic, any kind of performer, you do jokes and you feel like, once people have heard it, that's enough. But it's always fun, to find out that things stick with people, and that's really great. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, and I think that there's a real truth to that. This is going to sound horrible coming from me, but I've seen literally hundreds and hundreds of comics and hours of material. And the fact that one of my favorite bits to share with people is the, mango adult magazine story means that it really struck a nerve and was something that stayed with me all these years. And that is let's put it properly, it's a feather in your cap.
Yeah, that's right.
It comes
I gotta keep straightening it up.
Comes back to the Indian. So we haven't talked in a while. You were on the road for a number of years. When did you decide to stop doing stand-up comedy as a career?
I stopped doing comedy actually probably not too long after I stopped, being at Laugh. I stopped doing comedy around 1997. I had gone back to college and got a degree, although I don't use it. And I got married. And I think so that's about 1997. To answer the question, I'd give you a longer answer, but
no, but getting married and getting a degree and realizing that, there's a point where entertainers have to decide, was this something fun I did, or was more like a working hobby versus, no, this is my life's goal and this is what I'm going to do. And they pick a road basically. And you would be on the far more heavy side of the road, is that many entertainers after 5 or 10 years of performing, when they are ready to settle down, as they say, it is not an easy life being a road comic. It's not good for relationships, marriage. It's not, can be difficult financially. It could be a lot of fun for your young years, but it is a challenge. And both of us know a lot of people that made a good living doing it, but you were certainly the higher numbers of people made your choice and went into it. What did you end up doing after that, or what's gets you excited these days?
I'm a software computer developer, software developer.
Oh,
yeah,
that's cool.
So, so I mean, I like that. I've been somewhat passionate about it at times, but definitely I think comedy and performing is definitely my first love. And so I stopped doing comedy around 97. Just kind of sort of like imagine someone putting their kind of putting the guns away, trying to forget about it, right? And about 12 years ago, I was, I didn't even tell people I was a comic, right? And that I'd ever been a comic, but my wife would sometimes say, "Oh, you were a comic? Were you funny? Were you not funny? Were you funny?" And he always like, I mean, if you have to tell somebody, "Yeah, it was funny," it's too late, right?
Right. Yeah, but I mean, but we're going back to what we mentioned earlier. If you could say, "Well, no, I got paid," that when there's that difference between I'm the funniest guy at the office or I'm getting paid to entertain strangers. There's a huge difference.
Yeah. So that is exactly, it's a huge difference. But so what I ended up doing was, this was like YouTube had come, this is a while now, right? So, but YouTube was out there and you could post something. So I said, I'm going to post I'll put some videos up. I'll put them on YouTube. And then if someone says, "Oh, were you funny?" I can just say, here's a video. You watch it. You can decide for yourself. Right. And so I had that idea, but in the process, I had these old VHS tapes, and I had to. So I'd play the VHS tape and then be able to you have to record it, right? To put it onto a DVD, whatever. And in watching those, basically watching those sets, which I hadn't even watched in years, I was like, I really enjoyed doing this. I was pretty funny. And it just kind of gave me the bug again. And so I started back doing some Toastmasters and performing some more. So it was a nice to come back and start performing again, was nice.
That's really cool that it what it did is reminded you of the fun you had and got you. Mm-hmm. So my next question was going to be, so one of the reasons I do this podcast and one of the reasons I've been booking and producing fundraisers 4 to 6 a year for the last 20 years since I sold the club is I miss it. I miss the stage. Mm-hmm. I love emceeing. Yeah. I wasn't a paid professional entertainer, but I love the stage. And it's interesting that that's what you felt. So because of that, have you gotten on stage in the last 10, 20 years? Have you done anything just to keep your chops?
I have, when I first started out doing, so I first wanted to come back and perform. So I did Toastmasters, and I'm still doing that. And I went out to, do some open mics. I've had a couple of runs of like going out and doing, like trying to do some open mics, getting up to the showcase level, getting a few $10, $25 gigs here and there. But then it's like, oh man, this is a miserable life, away from my family too much. And it has changed. But so I'll continue to do things like, I've done some showcases fairly recently for, that have been fun.
Oh, that's cool, Cody. That's great. Yeah. And you go back out as Cody Cotulla, or you go as Cody Blaine?
I went out as Cody Cotulla. That was a decision I made. I said, I'll perform as myself.
Your real Indian name.
That's right. Well, that was a big thing, I think, for my, looking back. And again, I don't want to get too serious or anything like that. But, looking at my, like when I stopped and what was happening when I stopped in comedy, one part of it for me was, I was very young when I started, and, my biggest struggle really was I had no idea how to ask for help. And it really never occurred to me to go like, oh, I could probably, like, I was struggling with my career, but the idea of, I wonder if I could ask one of these people that has a business, how do you do the business? Just those kinds of things never occurred to me, right? Asking for help or whatever. And I think that's, you talk about your comedy thing, these comedy schools. I think that's probably one of the biggest things I would say to anybody starting out in comedy would be, you know what? You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it alone. Be open to asking for help and stuff. So that was a big deal.
It's interesting that you say that because, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started over 12 companies, and comedy is certainly my first love, but I've done a lot of different things in my life. And I've recently been sharing the 7 secrets to being a successful entrepreneur. And one of them is, don't be afraid to ask. Ask those that are doing it. There's nothing really new and creative. Everybody's doing whatever you want to do somewhere. Find those people that you respect or you acknowledge what they're doing, and just go up and ask them. And you'd be surprised how many people love to share information and share advice because they're proud of what they do. And it's the same in comedy as it is in business, that if you were to, you're going to find a few a-holes out there, but if you ask a few comics or club owners, hey, it's like when you ask me, what do I need to do to be a feature? Okay. You had the balls to ask, here's the answer. And then you did it, and boom, you got 3 times the pay. I mean, it really, you did do it, Cody. You said that you don't do it, but you have done it. It is important to communicate.
Yeah, you're right. That's it. It's funny. I think about that story and think about that event. I didn't think about it myself, being willing to ask. I guess part of the thing is when I said, "Hey, can I feature?" It never even occurred to me that you would say no. I thought like what?
Well, as you said, tough love, but it was the point was to improve you. Well, tell you what,
that's it,
Cody. I'm so glad that we had a chance to connect. This has been fun to find out what you've been up to and to share some of the old stories and material. You are one of the guys that we fondly remember as one of the regulars at the clubs and somebody we always enjoyed working with. Your comedy always, whatever level you were, you brought to the stage what I was looking for as a producer, and I always appreciated that. And
I appreciate that.
So thank you. And in this particular podcast interview, it's just a thrill to reconnect and share some of this stories and information. And everybody stay tuned. We'll have a little bit of live Cody Blaine. We don't have Cody Cotulla. We have Cody Blaine live on stage, so you can see his type of material. But Cody, thanks so much for sharing with us today. And any final words for the audience about stand-up comedy or your role in the entertainment business?
I think I tell anybody thinking about it's a long life. It's a long life. Enjoy it, and particularly if you're going to be a comic, have fun, be patient.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. You got to give something a shot. If you don't try it, you don't know. I'm always telling people, everybody should try to get on stage at least once or twice. Maybe it's that whole 10 seconds or 5 minutes of fame thing, but it gives you such a perspective on yourself when you're trying to engage with strangers. And that's really where the art form of stand-up comedy reaches its pinnacle of success, is that you're connecting with total strangers on such a personal level. I think comedy is amazing. But Cody, you were one of the best. Always great to have around. And with your permission, we're going to share a little bit of your material. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Do. Cool. My pleasure, Scott. Great talking with you. All
right, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Here comes some comedy by Cody Blaine. Thanks, Cody.
Thank you.
Please remember to drink and also please smoke. Smoke as much as you possibly can. If you're breathing, you can be smoking. That's what I say. I say, see, drinking and smoking is the only thing that separates us from the animals. You're never going to see a duck smoking a cigarette. It'd be cool to see that, though, wouldn't it? Or just some chain-smoking alcoholic duck. See him flying the south for the winter. He's got a pack of Marlboros rolled up in one hand. Filters are for pussy's tattoo. Just hacking amazing. You know the altitude is too much for him, so it's flying like 6 inches off the ground. Beer belly smacking on the speed bump. During mating season, he's lying to all the lady ducks. Hey baby, you know, I used to be an eagle. He gets really drunk, ends up going home with a decoy. Good night, I'm Coby. Thank you.
That was a little live material by Cody Blaine. We just had a terrific interview and now some great comedy. Hey, thanks for joining us for this week's podcast show. Be sure to share it, tell your friends, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.